Indiana. He's also the host of Nuestra Comunidad on WLTH Radio. He's connected with many communities, organizations, and civic groups that are working on immigration issues in Northwest Indiana, and he was instrumental in making this conference happen. Working on press releases, working on interviews on his own radio show, and also providing publicity that helped make this a successful conference. So I want to introduce Juan M. Andrade, and I ask you to come here, Juan, so they can take you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juan M. Andrade, and I am the founder of Nuestra Comunidad NWI, the only English-Spanish live bilingual talk program of its kind on WLTH Radio every Friday evening from 5 to 6 p.m. and every Saturday morning from 10 to 11 o'clock, and only on WLTH Radio. We are also a media voice for the Hispanic, Latino people, and more. My co-host is Dee Gomez, and you can find us on Facebook. For the record, my parents and my sisters and family before them were born in Mexico. I was born in the United States. For the record, CIRN, Comprehensive Immigration Reform Now, is more of a theme than it is an organization, so please keep that in mind. I have a question right here and right now. ¿Quién quiere reforma migratoria integral después? Levanten las manos. ¿Quién quiere reforma migratoria integral ahora? Levanten las manos. What I just asked, ladies and gentlemen, is how many people here would like to see comprehensive immigration reform later? Raise your hands. And how many people here would like to see comprehensive immigration reform now? Today, ahora. That being said, before we talk about solutions, we need to know what the problems are. Because we cannot fix any problems in its entirety unless we go to the root of those problems. And what we see on our local news as it relates to migration, what we see on major political talk shows, read about in print, listen to on the radio, on social media, and talk about, the root of the problem as it relates to migration is not at our nation's border. It is at those nations that the migrants are leaving and escaping from. That is where the root of the problem is, and not at our nation's border. So, what we see at our nation's border right here and right now are massive number of migrants seeking to come into our country. On a daily basis, we've had as many as 10,000 plus in some cases. Some coming in the right way, others not. Some getting processed, others not. With 1 month to go left on the fiscal year for 2023, the number of migrants encounters this year alone is over 2,800,000 plus, which already exceeds the 2,700,000 plus of last year. So pretty much what we have at our nation's border is chaos. What we have is a crisis, un crisis. What we have is out of control, fuera de control. What we have has been termed by the media and the general public in some sense inhumane and humano. Ladies and gentlemen, we can see in a sense what's happening at our nation's border right here and right now. But there's other major problems at our nation's border that we don't see. We don't see human trafficking, where men, women, and children get captured and get exploited and are forced into child pornography and are forced into drug trafficking and are forced into sex trafficking, otherwise known as white slavery. Human trafficking doesn't just occur at our nation's border, it is a global issue to the tune of $150 billion illegal business worldwide. And you know who profits? The cartels. But there's more. It's not just about human trafficking, but we also don't see the gun smuggling that's taking place at our nation's border. Guns smuggled, can you guess, by the United States citizens from the United States into Mexico. So how are these guns are being acquired? You know what? They're being acquired by American women who then purchase these guns and their parts and transfer these guns to their relatives, to their boyfriends, and to acquaintances, who then smuggle these guns and parts into Mexico a few at a time, otherwise known as mules, paid for by the cartels. So they're also hidden in storage containers in trucks, in passenger vehicles, in hidden compartments, in spare tires, in gas tanks, and sometimes passed off as toys. And in some cases, or many cases, where the cartels bribe or even threaten border personnel. But wait, there's even more. There's the issue and problem of drugs and fentanyl at our nation's border that we don't see. So there's a large number of fentanyl that are smuggled into this country from Mexico, once again, by United States citizens. And smaller amounts are smuggled by air, by way of China. According to Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, what he's saying is these drugs are not coming through our nation's border. They're coming in by the ports of entry. So where are these ports of entry? At San Diego, at Tucson, at El Paso, at Laredo, and Rio Grande Valley, and between ports, by way of tractor trailers, trucks, and passenger vehicles. In short, the raw products that are used to make the fentanyl come by way of China. And then these products end up in Mexican drug labs, where they make these raw products into fentanyl. And then these finished products get smuggled by way into Mexico by way of American citizens, once again paid for by the cartels. I call this part of my presentation common sense solutions for everlasting problems that will not cost an arm and a leg. Soluciones de sentido común para problemas eternos de Alberto, que no cuesta un brazo o una pierna. So when we talk about solutions as it relates to migration, we need to go to the root of the problem. In my perspective, the root of the problem is that those nations that the people are leaving and escaping from. That's where the root is at, and not at our nation's border. And this is something that's already taking place to a point. And that is have a delegation of US, Mexico, and Canada to have a communication with the leaders of those nations and try and work something out to everyone's benefit, so that the people that are escaping and leaving those nations won't have to leave or escape those nations anymore. This may be a little controversial, but this is my perspective, and that is this: end all in-person migration. And what do you do then? You create an online application process instead, composed of multiple major languages, that will be step-by-step detailed process, that will list estimated dates as you go through the process, with contact information for the migrants if they need more information or have questions. And then once approved, then they get the go-ahead to come to this country, and not before. This is very critical. And this is important to me because for the past 3 years, I'm an officer of the court. I'm actually a probation officer. I hope to work a few more years. And that is this: there needs to be penalties for anyone that provides false information on their application process. If they do, they lose their right to be admitted and could result in deportation. In the United States, you can get arrested for providing false information to a police officer. There's a thing called the rule of law. Migrants coming to this country, once in, for any migrant that comes into this country and they are in already, and they start committing criminal offenses, guess what? They need to be deported. It's called the rule of law. How can people coming from other nations that are complaining about the violence, about the corruption, about the breaking of law in their countries, come here and start doing the same in our country? So what does this do now? It creates an opportunity, resources, and more people to deal with the people that have been here for ages, the 11 or 12 million plus that have been here already. So here's what I'm saying. Work with the people that have been here already for years. The ones that have been model migrants. The one that came in the right way. The one that have not committed crimes. And you know what? We need to put them on a path to citizenship once and for all. Human trafficking. What's a possible solution for human trafficking? Take the United States and UN officials, have them come together, and then call on all the internet providers and bring them together and get them to do two things. Get them to shut down the dark web. It is the dark web where that is used as a medium for life of crime, so to speak. The other thing, get all the internet providers to shut down all child pornography sites. Can anyone here think of a good reason why we should have child pornography on any internet site? And you know what child pornography is? It's where you have adults that exploit children. We don't need that on any internet site. Shut them both down. And you know what? If the internet providers refuse to do that, there will be major consequences. And not fines, because that's the easy way out. So we need to educate the public about human trafficking. So there's gun smuggling issues. So there's some legislation that's taken place already to make gun smuggling a federal offense and to make tougher penalties for the gun smugglers. On the issue of fentanyl and solutions, go to the heart of town. We need to go to China because that's where the materials that are used, the raw materials are used come from China to make the fentanyl. So get the United States and other nations to come together, deal with China, and in all certain terms let them know to stop the flow of that product coming out of China. If they do so, if they don't, there will be major sanctions. Get the United States and Mexico to work on destroying the drug labs in Mexico, and then shut down some of the ports of entry. Some of this is already happening already. Finish building the wall. Finish building the wall. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm saying right now is this. This ties everything together. We need to finish building the wall. And I'll tell you why. Because of the drug smuggling that's taking place from Mexico into the United States. Why? Because of the gun smuggling that's going from the United States into Mexico. And you know what? Those guns end up in the hands of the cartels that used to kill Mexican citizens, that used to kill soldiers, that used to kill police, and so forth. And so the drugs, the guns, and the human trafficking, that will put a major dent in all those areas that are either injuring people, hurting people, or even killing people. So let me just finish by saying this. It's not, so comprehensive immigration reform is not about just migration. It is about human trafficking, drug smuggling, and gun smuggling. To Congress, let me say this. The worst thing they can do is put together a huge package as a form of comprehensive immigration reform. What they need to do is take that huge package and cut it up into major categories and try and pass and vote on each major category, one major category at a time, as opposed to trying to pass it on in one huge package. What it does, there's a greater chance of passing this comprehensive immigration reform in categories, and also you can see who votes for and against. So my last thing that I want to say right here, right now is this. What should comprehensive immigration legislation look like? You know what? It should be fair, tarifa. It should be just, justo. It should be loving, cariñoso. It should be doable, viable. It should be manageable, manejable. And last but not least, it needs to be godly, piadoso. And I thank you.
Our next speaker is Jim Mulholland. He's the Executive Director of the Companion Community Development Alternatives, which is in Indianapolis. It's called COCODOT, which connects churches, universities, organizations, service clubs, civics groups, with cooperatives and community development organizations in El Salvador, Nicaragua, and other Central American nations. The goal is to support Central American civic groups and development and to raise awareness among American citizens. For 20 years, Jim was a pastor for the Methodist Church and Quaker denominations with deep connections in social justice movements in the U.S. and internationally. He also worked for an urban development corporation for 10 years. He handles all the administrative responsibilities for COCODA now, as well as fundraising, grant writing, communication, and marketing. And he's going to share with us some of the activities that the Companion Community Development Alternatives do in Indianapolis.
Thank you. I really enjoyed today listening and hearing a deep dive into these issues, but I'm going to approach it from a very different perspective over the next 10 minutes, and that is to talk to you in terms of a practitioner. What does somebody who is working with rural communities in El Salvador and Nicaragua specifically, what are we trying to do to address this question of immigration and migration? Our organization actually started in the 1980s during the Civil War in El Salvador. It began when 2 college students decided to go down and volunteer in the Mesa Grande United Nations refugee camp that at that point was on the border of Honduras and El Salvador. They worked there for a summer, became inspired, came back, and started our organization initially to lobby Congress to end the U.S. Supply of money to the military. So they were part of that lobbying effort with lots of many other organizations that was somewhat successful in pressuring the U.S. government to stop that. And then subsequent to the ending of the U.S. funding of the military, there was a peace accords in 1992 in El Salvador and the end of the war. So at that point, our organization was changed into a community development corporation with the purpose of working with the people in those refugee camps as they returned to their communities to rebuild. So I give you that history to say that a big part of what has to happen, as many have suggested, is to address the quality of life in these countries. I'll be honest with you, in 1990, the first time I visited Central America, I had a very skewed understanding of the world. I was young, I grew up in a small town in southern Illinois, all white. I thought that Illinois was the greatest state and the greatest country in the world. So when I went to Honduras, I went as a savior. I went with a mission group, and we were going to go down and bring civilization to the Hondurans. And after about 3 weeks there, I realized that my understanding of the world was seriously skewed and seriously flawed. One of the things that I found intriguing was before we went on that trip, a group of us actually had a conversation where we said, how are we going to handle it when these Hondurans come to us and want us to help them come to the United States? How are we going to deal with that? Because in our minds, Obviously, no one would want to stay in Honduras. And once they met gringos, they would want to get our help in coming back with us to the United States. Well, first to my surprise, that didn't happen. Not a single person ever asked if I would do that. And in all my years in Central America, I can honestly say I've never had that conversation. And one of the things I began to learn was that, guess what? Surprise, surprise, Hondurans and Salvadorans and Nicaraguans love their country as much as we do. And for the vast majority of persons in those countries, their desire is not to leave their country. Their desire is to live where they were born with their friends and family and with the smells and with the sounds that they love. Just like you and I. So what that began to help me understand that it is this idea of American exceptionalism, this idea that we are the greatest country in the world, that gives us such a skewed understanding of migration and immigration, because we see it all as a pull. We are the best country in the world, and we are pulling people to us. And once you have that framework, it's very difficult to be sympathetic to a lot of those people. But the truth of the matter is that when it comes to migration and immigration, as we've heard in various ways, it's largely a push. It's not a pull. It's a push. People are being pushed out of their country by violence, by economic issues, by climate change, and this push is forcing people across the world from some countries towards other countries. And there's an old engineering maxim that I think is important to understand, and it goes this: it doesn't matter how strong the dam is if it keeps raining. It doesn't matter how strong the dam is if it keeps raining. Well, friends, it's been raining in Central America for the last 50 to 60 years. And that's been a rain, as we heard earlier, that has a lot to do with policies by the United States. It has a lot to do with economic forces. It has a lot to do with corporations. But what it comes down to is these forces are pushing people towards our country, and we are not going to build a wall strong enough to keep them out. Because there's no choice. One way or the other, when you're pushed, you move. So having said all of that, what do we do to address that? Well, the very first thing I would say is we have to be about the quality of life in these countries in some way. And while I certainly understand Dr. Oka's suggestion that in some situations these refugee camps need to become safe places, and I think it's a very pragmatic response, I also hope that some of our efforts would be about increasing the quality of life in these countries to such a place that people don't feel pushed. So for instance, with our organization, one of the primary ways we do this is with solar-powered water systems. So we go into rural communities that have not had water or electricity. And using solar power, we suddenly give them their own small energy cooperative that has power, that can bring water, and is controlled completely by them. And this can be miraculous. Because I think we underestimate how important water is. Water is the most basic piece of community development. Once you have water, all kinds of things can happen. So when we begin to work in a community and we can provide water, that releases men, women, and children from many hours every day that were spent in just getting water to doing other kinds of things. Whether that's going to school, whether that's doing entrepreneurial activities, whether that's just being with their family, it creates a quality of life that makes it less likely that someone will be pushed out. Now, that's a very small thing, and in terms of this larger picture of all of these forces that we cannot control, be they political, economic, climate change, I'll be honest with you, I have no power over any of those things. So I either have to give up and say those forces are so strong that there's nothing I can do, or again, I can choose to do these small practitioner kinds of actions that I do think make a difference in specific communities in these countries. Now, I'm honest with you, I'll be honest with you, we only invest in about $500,000 a year, which is nothing compared to the needs down there. But in those communities, it does make a difference. And we do see measurable differences in how often people make the choice to migrate. That brings me to the other issue that I think is so important, and I think that Alfredo may talk a little bit about this. And that is, I want to talk to you about something called an H-1B visa. Anybody heard of that? A few? Hardly anyone knows about that. This is a legal system that we have in the United States that allows people to come to our country, work for a period of time, and then return to their country. And when I talk to people in El Salvador and Nicaragua, they love that idea. Because they don't want to come to the United States and live for the rest of their life. They don't want to leave their family and do all of those things. They would love the option of being able to come to the United States, work for a period of time, earn a little nest egg that they can then take back and create businesses, build farms, buy land, all of the kinds of things that make life more sustainable. So let me give you a couple figures to kind of help us understand what this means. Right now, there are remittances from the United States to El Salvador. Remittance is people who are Salvadoran in the United States who send money back to their families in El Salvador. Right now, this for the year 2023, that looks to be about $6.9 billion that are going to be sent back by Salvadorans in the United States to their families. To put that in perspective, that is 14% of the gross national product of El Salvador. It's a huge amount of money. Now think about that. If we went to the Congress and said, we need $6.9 billion to give to El Salvador because that would do great things, it wouldn't happen. But this, through a natural system, is creating this huge influx of dollars that do incredible things. And every community I go to, there are families who have at least one person in the United States who's sending money back. And that is what a lot of those families are using to survive. $6.9 billion. Now, some of that is coming obviously from undocumented persons, but much of it is coming from documented persons. And so one of the things that we understand is if we could increase the H-1B visa program, this could make huge differences for Central America. And I won't speak to the rest of the world. It's a whole different story. But at least for Central America, if we could make it possible for thousands of them to come up, work in the agricultural fields, work in the other places where we right now don't have enough workers. We have businesses clamoring for more of these visas, but right now in the United States it's only 65,000 a year that are allowed. So it's a 3-year visa, which means that we have about 180,000 persons a year that can use these visas. But it's clear that many, many more people would if we would allow it. Only 14% of the people who apply actually get the visa. So that means that we probably have close to 1 million people, many from Central America, that are applying to do this. Now think about that. They're not applying to come to our country and live forever. They're applying for the opportunity to come work for a while in jobs that we need people, and then take that money, return to their country, and strengthen their own communities and country. So one of the things I am really calling on everyone to do, I think the idea of massive immigration reform by our government is not going to happen. Okay? There are too many reasons, there are too many factors that are to the benefit of not solving the solution. Okay? And we've heard a lot of that spoken. But I do think we could pressure our government, and ironically, this is something that both Republicans and Democrats have some interest in increasing the H-1B program. So what would it mean if we brought 650,000 people a year rather than 65,000? What would that do? Number one, it would take many of those jobs that are unfilled in the United States right now and fill them with somebody who really wants that job. Number two, that's 10 times, think about that, 10 times what we're doing now. That means we would be potentially sending back $60 billion to Central America. The entire GNP for El Salvador is $60 billion. So we begin to think about a massive amount of money. It's not coming from our federal government. It's not coming out of our budgets. It's coming from people who want to work, and in the process will funnel billions of dollars back into their own economies. Now, is that a perfect solution? No. Is it not the ideal solution? No. But is it using the present system in a way that can benefit both those countries and eliminate many of the people who feel like their only choice is to immigrate illegally? Here's the last thing I'll say before I sit down. Our present system is actually a trap for so many people. Because if you're someone who's trying to get here illegally, this is the situation. If you are successful, you can't go home. You can't go home. You were the lucky one who made it across the border. The chance of going back and doing that again is really low. So you stay. And you maybe stay year after year. Maybe you get married here, you have other children. Maybe you begin to miss your own children and spouse in the other country, and so you try to get them with your money. You pay the coyote to get them to bring them across the border. So we've actually created the system we've created is giving us exactly what we're getting, which is this mass of illegal immigration. So again, if we could increase the H-1B system, what that would do is allow hundreds of thousands of men and women to come here, help our economy, help their own economies, and create a legal way for people to cooperate nation to nation. Now, I still think that's probably unlikely for us to push through. I won't be Pollyannish about it, but I think it's more likely that we could push both Democrat and Republican representatives to begin to consider that. Now, in fairness, when Trump was in office, he wanted to end that program completely, which for me suggests it's a pretty good program and we ought to give it a lot of attention. But at least with the Biden administration, there have been attempts to change that, but the biggest barrier is statutes that can only be changed by our representatives in Congress that sets it at 65,000. That has to change. That has to be expanded. So I'd love to talk later when we get to the Q&A about some of the things we do in Central America, and also about this idea about the H-1B visas, but I have to believe that there are still small things that we can do that make a real difference. Thank you.
Okay. Our third speaker is Alfredo Estrada. He's an immigration attorney. He's actually currently in a case, which will just be a couple more minutes. He's online to talk. He's making a plea, right? So, but he's going to speak. So I was going to save this for the questions, but they asked me to fill in 2 minutes, so I'm going to say some things that are going to upset many of you. I don't believe there's any such thing as an illegal human being.
Thank you.
To start talking about illegals, don't use that word. You may be undocumented. Look, we live in Indiana. You can't smoke marijuana. But you go 20 miles that way or 20 miles that way, it's legal. Who made it legal? Who made an illegal illegal? You didn't, we didn't, the American people didn't, the general population in the world didn't. As Dr. Oka said earlier, people have been migrating for centuries. One person can't change anything. I agree with that. But we have power. We have power. Think about the civil rights movement. That was not done by Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King, and certainly not by LBJ. Who did it? 250,000 people marched in Washington, D.C. Thousands blocked the Selma Bridge. Hundreds there were freedom riders, north and south. They sat in at Woolworth's to order a cup of coffee. The NAACP in Monroe, North Carolina formed a National Rifle Association and dared the Klan to show up, and they never did. The Black Panthers stopped police brutality in Oakland, California. Millions of working people riding or not riding on a bus, ordering or not ordering a cup of coffee, getting a union contract or not getting a union contract is what made a difference. We can make a difference. I do not accept the idea that it is what it is. Climate change that's just what it is. I'll get a better air conditioner. Right? Or there's nothing I can do about immigration because the people that they make the decisions because we force them and they have no other choice. But if we don't move in our own organizations with our own power, yes, we're hopeless, we're helpless. If we accept a pragmatic, limited solution, that's exactly what you're going to get. When you demand democracy, when you demand equality, when you demand fairness and justice, you may not get it, but if you don't demand it, it's not going to happen because of the goodwill of somebody sitting in the White House or in Congress. Aha! Alfredo Estrada is here. I'm really happy that Alfredo's here. He's a graduate of Purdue University Northwest. Also, like me, he was a former steelworker. After graduation from here, he earned his law degree at Valparaiso Law School. He was a member of the Honors Division, graduated magna cum laude. He's a partner at Burke, Costanza, and Carberry, which sponsored Pancho and Carolyn Rodea, and we appreciate that. He's the chair of the Immigration Practice Group, and he's a member of the firm's Litigation Practice Group. He was the first Latino president of the Lake County Bar Association. He served on its board of managers as president of the Rudy Lozano Bar Association, which used to be called the Northwest Indiana Hispanic Bar Association. He's received multiple awards from the Indiana State Bar, the Abriendo Caminos Award, and others. We're happy to have you here, Alfredo. Thank you.
Well, let me start by apologizing for my tardiness. I had what was supposed to be a lot shorter court hearing at the Los Angeles Immigration Court, but the judge tells me when I could leave, and she told me I couldn't leave for a while, so I apologize. So today we're here, we heard a lot about immigration law, and Dr. Bloom put it in a way that it's not pretty. But I want to focus today my experience about how we help immigrants and what the solutions look like on an everyday level as an attorney. The last comprehensive immigration reform that we had was in 1997, so we're looking over, do the math for me, Lee, 25 years now, right? And it was a one-size-fits-all immigration law, the Immigration Nationality Act, which tried to fix a system that's complex, that's convoluted, for a world that's even more complex, more convoluted. It's just a bad way to do it when you have Central America, Mexico, within walking distance, believe it or not, and then China, Indonesia, Russia, all treated the same within our immigration law. John Kennedy, and I've written about it before, but John Kennedy said that we must go beyond politics in updating the INA. Remember that our national identity is to create comprehensive immigration reform that should be generous, it should be fair, it should be flexible. With such policy, we can turn to the world and our own past with clean hands and clear conscience. Just think if we had clean hands and a clear conscience when it came to our immigration policy. I can't say we have that today. That was in the 1960s when John Kennedy said that. Just so you know, when they passed that version of the INA, he allotted for 50,000 extra visas for Ireland. So take that as you may. So what does comprehensive immigration look like? We have great advocates that presented today, 2 of them sitting up front, 3 of them sitting up front. But what happens when we get there? What happens when the advocacy and the protest and the calls to congressmen and senators and electing politicians with courage to address the issue? What do we tell them we want? And how do we tell it precisely so they understand and can make law that practically works? So I have a laundry list, and I had to cut out 2 pages of it today so I wouldn't talk on forever. One, we all know we're dreamers. We're all dreamers. And today they're being used as a political football, being passed from one side to the other in the court systems, in Congress, with acts and proposed legislation that are used for talking points. None with a real chance of passing. DACA came into existence through the Obama administration as an executive order. And if you remember, then came DAPA, where the parents of those children could qualify for some type of deferred action. And that began, the DAPA executive order began the fight of court action within immigration policy. But immigration policy should not be enacted through executive order. We have a branch of government that's perfectly and suited to address the policy of immigration, and that's Congress. They have yet to act for 25 years. They have yet to act for over 11 years on DACA. DACA kids who qualified back in the day are now getting married, having children. And during this time, are getting rights revoked, getting them put back to them, getting some taken away, and then some given back, depending upon our political administration. So we need to provide a pathway to citizenship for DACA, TPS, and others in similar situations. Individuals who have lived here for decades, who work here, who provide to the economy, and who can prove, like DACA individuals are required to do, that they do not have a criminal record. In fact, DACA and Dreamers are required to have a lower criminal record than individuals applying for legal permanent residence. If they have a significant misdemeanor, such as a DUI, they no longer qualify for DACA. Whereas an individual going through a family petition could have a DUI and still get their green card. And we need to act fast for them. But DACA and Dreamers, although an important part and a type of political clickbait when we talk about it, are not the only immigrants that we should talk about when we talk about undocumented Americans. There's a statute within the INA called 245I. It was enacted as the Legal Immigration Family Equity Act. It was a bipartisan act initiated by George H. Bush, where individuals who entered the United States illegally and had a petition prior to 1997 at the time could pay a penalty of $1,000 and get their green card if they were eligible here in the United States. It's a Republican administration that passed that act. It was a compromise. So you came here legally, give us $1,000, come in and be a good American, a good resident. Was that later renewed in 2001 under the Clinton administration? And it was the last time it was touched. It's 22 years old. I still deal with it on a daily basis. But it's a compromise that shows a concern for family equity and family unity, and also recognizes that they did break immigration law in requiring a penalty. If you hire an attorney, such as myself, to go through this process, you're looking at $1,760 USCIS fees just for your green card, $1,000 penalty, anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 in legal fees. It's not a cheap process, but it's a process that makes sense and should be renewed if we had a Congress able to recognize the actual concerns of undocumented Americans. We should allow deported veterans who served this country in the armed forces to return to the United States and granted citizenship. It's a shame that individuals serve this country, put their lives on the line, and are not living in this country, not given the rights that they deserve. That seems like something both sides of the political parties could agree on. We should codify unlawful presence waivers. These are waivers that allow individuals to wait here in the United States if they entered illegally to adjudicate their case. Prior to 2012, under Obama administration, an individual will have to leave, let's say to Mexico, and await their waiver to be approved because they entered the United States. Waiting for 2 or 3 years, families being separated. The I-601 waiver process now allows them to be here, but it was through regulation and not codification through Congress. Again, the inability of Congress to actually see something that's working, that's in place, and yet still not acted. So there's DOC 245I, the unlawful provisional waiver process, all in place through the administrative, executive branch, and Congress still can't see, still doesn't act. And all they have to do is make more rules. We need to transfer our deportation courts from a Article 3 court, which is an executive administrative court, to Article 1 court, such as the federal courts, a bankruptcy court, where actually rules of evidence or rules of procedure apply. This will allow for judges to get judicial independence, control their docket, continue cases as required or needed, and dismiss cases when there's a humane reason to do so. If you might remember, during the Trump administration, they gave immigration judges a quota of cases they needed to hear. A quota. X amount of people deported. They became numbers. What kind of due process can we have when individuals are not treated as humans? When the basic right of due process is ignored because
Impactful
the
when
IJs,
they're
the immigration judges
both
don't meet
then
their quota, they may lose their job. You might not know, but immigration judges, 95% of them come from ICE. They were former ICE prosecutors. Now, I was just on an immigration court call, had two today, one in Chicago, one in LA. When going to a trial in immigration court, it's not like what you would think. I ask my clients questions. It's our burden when we file for asylum or 42B defense, which is normal. It's my burden. That's our burden. But the next to go is not the prosecutor. It's the immigration judge. So we're going against questions from the immigration judge next, then the prosecutor. Two prosecutors in one hearing, and I'm supposed to beat them both. It's an uphill battle in immigration court. So we need judicial independence. We need them to be lifetime appointments and not political pawns with quotas who treat individuals as numbers. We need to repeal 1325. That would end family separation at the borders, detention of children. We need to treat individuals at the borders, whether entering illegally or through asylum, as human beings. If a mother comes with her child, we need to keep them together. Anybody familiar with INA 212A6? No? I am. And 212A9. We need to eliminate these. 212A6 says when an individual enters the United States, that's illegal entry. And when he leaves the United States because grandma or mom's dying and they want to see him before they die, and then re-enters, that multiple bar entry is now a lifetime. Not a 10-year under age 6, but a lifetime ban. Prior to 1997, no one cared. We recognized that individuals needed to come back and forth to this country to take care of home, their family at home, and the family here in the United States. There's been a push through recent Democratic candidates, presidential candidates, to eliminate those because it recognizes that families are separated because of those bars. I got 2 minutes. 2-minute warning. I want to end agreements between 287G agreements between ICE and local municipalities. I was a drafter of a welcome city ordinance that was passed in Gary and East Chicago that led to years of federal litigation, and we came out on top. That welcome city ordinance was like sanctuary city, but not, right? And there's a special Indiana law that doesn't allow cities and towns to withhold information of an undocumented American from ICE officials. So we drafted an ordinance saying, don't collect it. And don't acknowledge ICE detainers, which is a police officer request to keep an undocumented American. And the federal government was enticing these towns with money to enter these agreements, and so we need to end those. We need to treat individuals within our city and towns, within the schools with our kids, as humans, and not see where they come from, but where they are now. And I'll leave with this. We need to eliminate for-profit immigration detention in the prison industry within immigration courts. I had the experience. I had the unwelcome experience of representing an individual detained in the Cleveland Immigration Court who has a private detention center 45 miles away. A bond in Chicago, which has an agreement with municipal county detentions. Individuals here, 19, no criminal history, father here, would have been a $2,000, $3,000 bond. A lot of money for these individuals. The bond in Cleveland was a $12,000 bond. And you can't tell me because he was a higher risk because it's Cleveland of the national security, or less ties to the United States, because the ties and the risk are the same. It's because there is a for-profit prison that they have to keep open. That's the only reason. I had to drive 6 hours there because they didn't grant my motion to appear telephonically for a 15-minute hearing, and I left thinking I need to get the hell out of there before they jail me. That's how they run those courts out there. So if we're going to treat immigrants as humans, we can move this country forward. And I'll leave with this, because I went over my 2 years. We have a lot of individuals here on one side of the immigration aisle, and I get that. If I waved my wand, I would ask for asylum for everybody here, a job for everybody here, health care for everybody here, undocumented or not. But comprehensive immigration reform comes with compromise. We can't stay on our left side or our side of the aisle without coming towards the middle with the right side or their side of the aisle. We're going to leave the negotiation with two pissed off parties, and that's fine, but it's a move to the right direction. We have to recognize that we can't save everyone, but we can make a difference. So I request and I ask all you individuals asking for amnesty, you ask, you go out there, you fight, call your congressman. But know that when there's a compromise, it's a win for everybody. So thank you for having me. Thank you, Lee, for inviting me. Thank you for Purdue Northwest, who I'm a graduate of. My wife is a graduate of. We have a niece here. We're a Purdue Northwest family. And the last time I believe I was here, second last time I was here because Dr. Uriste made us come to a thing like this. And there were law school students, and I called my wife afterwards, and I said, you know what, I'm going to law school, honey. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks to all our panelists, Juan, Jim, Alfredo. Now's the time if you have questions or comments. There's a microphone in the middle aisle. We still have time for a few minutes, a few questions, a few comments. Don't be shy.
Hi, this question is mostly for Mr. Andrade. So you illustrate that many of your concerns are about drugs and weapons being trafficked, but you mentioned that it's because individuals seem to be coming over the wall or because they're coming in person. But how do your proposals of internet registration and constructing this wall fix these problems, especially considering, as far as I know, most people overstay their visas and aren't actually sneaking over the wall?
Well, you know who benefits from the way the system is right now? It's the cartels. They use the guns that are transferred, that are smuggled from the United States into Mexico. They use those guns to kill Mexican residents. They use those guns to kill Mexican police. They use those guns when they have confrontations with the Mexican army. They use those guns sometimes even to kill political officials in Mexico. So, and what that complements are the American gun smugglers that are doing that are being paid for by the cartels. When we talk about human trafficking, you know who benefits from the human trafficking? It's the cartels. You know who benefits from the drug trafficking? It's the cartels. So pretty much, they're making the money left and right based upon the immigration issue that we have right now in the country, the human trafficking, the gun smuggling, and the drug trafficking. So they're the ones that are making the monies left and right. Well, in the meantime, let me tell you this. In the United States, there's anywhere between 14 and 17,000 people that are trafficked yearly as it relates to gun smuggling. Anywhere between 200,000 and more firearms are trafficked from the United States into Mexico yearly. Let me also say this. Last year alone, there were over 100,000 people in this country of all different ages that died of drug deaths. Many of them that were laced with fentanyl. So when I said build a wall, I didn't say stop the process. I just said end the in-person process and create an online process. I didn't say stop it, because right now what you have is total chaos. And let me also say one more thing. When we talk about, and you know what the media is talking about, the mayor of New York, talking about these states that are, cities that are sanctuary cities. It's great to be a sanctuary city, but when it starts affecting your own people, and you know what may happen, within a little period? I see on the news now, you have confrontations of the people that live on the south side of Chicago with the migrants. The people that live on the south side of Chicago are saying, okay, they're getting all of this free stuff. What about us? You know what, if that continues, there could be actual violence among the south side residents and the migrants. So, did I answer your question? And if I did, okay, thank you so much.
We could have a debate here for the rest of the day. I just want to point out that Wells Fargo was found guilty by the DEA of funding the cartels that Juan is talking about. So it wasn't something that was run by the cartels or Mexican youth, but it was run through the Wells Fargo Bank. And I can show you the sources for that if you want. Did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, just one comment. I know it wasn't directed towards me, but the debate of immigration shouldn't be about cartels, right? You're right, individuals such as Europeans, Indians, everybody from that side of the world enter on B2 visas and overstay, Nigerians, Senegalese. The debate, if you allow it to be about cartels, we're not controlling the narrative. And that doesn't address the millions of Americans, undocumented Americans that are here today. The wall's not going to stop an individual who's hungry from coming across the street. A sibling petition for a Mexican national, the visa processing time today is August 1st, 2000. That means an individual who might be 15 years old gets a petition filed is not going to be adjudicated till he's 39. You tell me what decision that individual is going to make. Those are the people who are coming over. The cartels, that's not immigration. That's a different story. That's a different narrative. And if we feed into that narrative, we're never going to get comprehensive immigration reform. We can't win that. We have to win on the statute, on actual practicality, not about walls or cartels. We need to control the narrative. And if anybody asks you that, that's a totally different individual conversation.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Actually, I just had a comment for Jen. There was a program, the Bracero program, right? Because the H-1B, my wife and I went through it, and it's usually company sponsored, right? And companies are sponsoring people because they can pay them a particular amount and so on and so forth. And one of the biggest problems with the Bracero program was that those people had to pay good wages and it was just easier to have illegals working for slave wages rather than anything. Is there any of the H-1B program is really, really onerous because as someone who went through it, would there be a place for a Bracero program? Because I keep on hearing people say there's bipartisan talk. I don't know what support, but for a temporary worker program that solved the American agricultural and industrial labor issue, as well as making sure that people can go back and work legally to their country, so that people are not forced to stay here. Can you make a distinction between the H-1B, which is the temporary visa program, and the Bracero, which is a specialized program?
Yeah, without getting down in the weeds, because that gets really complicated how these different programs were different. I think what's clear is, kind of big picture, is that there are many people who, if given the opportunity, would work in the United States temporarily, then return. And that this would create a financial benefit. And this is how I think you sell it to conservative, liberal, whoever. You sell it that there's this economic benefit for the United States, and inversely, because of what we know about remittances, there's going to be a real financial benefit for the host countries or the countries of origin. In terms of how that is implemented, I think there still are problems with HB1, and that would be how onerous it is. But even under those onerous conditions, to realize, and I've talked to a lot of people, that if it's the difference is I'm going to pay thousands of dollars to a coyote to get me across the border, and maybe hundreds of dollars to someone to help me fill out that form. My hunch is that's more likely to be where people would choose, if that was the option. And again, remember that 86% of the people applying for the HB1 do not receive it. So there's this huge pool of people that are trying to use our system legally. But unfortunately, because of the 65,000 cap, it creates this huge bottleneck, I would say. So I really agree with what Alfredo was saying. Lots of those big reform things, I completely agree with those. And I think those will all be great. This is just one other piece in that puzzle. And I also agree with the idea earlier that probably part of the problem is this idea of getting comprehensive. I don't think that's going to happen. So how do we break these things into the pieces that, remarkably, there is some agreement across the party line around some of these. So how do we get there to be some agreement around some of those pieces that at least move us closer to a system that actually is fair, actually is mutually beneficial, actually infuses money into the countries that need that money? If you could create a system that's going to infuse billions of dollars into Central America, and it doesn't come out of the American taxpayer, how can that not be a popular idea? Because remember, when the U.S. gives money to Central America, it's not billions. We give in millions. It's a pittance compared to the kind of money that's being sent through remittances. So how do we use the system that is to better funnel money into Central America? So I'm not getting down in the weeds of the distinctions just because I'm not sure at this point that's the biggest problem. It's just convincing people that the expansion of these work programs could be part of the solution. So,
Yeah.
So, Doctor, I think we're confusing H-1Bs and H-2Bs. H-1Bs, the process you went through is for highly educated, the STEM field professors just like you. H-2Bs are for temporary non-agricultural workers that allow individuals to come in 6 months and then leave for 6 months. There's a cap of about 20,000. The Biden administration about 10,000. Biden administration set aside an additional 20 for the Central American Triangle and Haiti just recently. Those are highly sought after as well, a definite need. I think what you're getting at is an expansion of that H-2B process.
Yeah.
As the Brazil program you talked about, we have a Brazil program. It's just through undocumented Americans, and it's benefiting companies and the employers right now. Nothing's happened. Nothing's changed. We do have the Brazilians coming over just illegally, and everybody's turning a blind eye at this point.
We are at the end of our time for this session. I want to thank everybody for coming. In the Founders Lounge over there are several organizations that have prepared information of what they're doing on immigration and immigration reform. COCODA has a table. I think the Center for Global Studies has a table. Some Purdue student organizations have tables. I'd encourage you to walk through and help yourself to the materials that they want to share with you. The next major event will be right here in this room. The tables will be gone, the podium will be gone. We have a performance of Dr. Castro Uriosti's Ceviche in Pittsburgh, and we have the Purdue Theater Group that's going to perform that, and that will be at 7 o'clock right here.
Great.
We may have.
How long is that
It's about an hour and hour and 15 minutes, and then Dr. Castro Ariosti will be here, and the actors will be here, and there may be questions and discussions afterwards. So. Pancho and Carolyn may perform shortly while we're doing our roundtable for maybe another hour. And again, thank you to your firm for sponsoring Carolyn and Pancho Rodea. And thank you all for coming. And we'll see you in a short time.